Hey, good afternoon and welcome. It's 5:30 PM and I'm calling the May 7, 2024 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order. May is the month of preservation, the month, Preservation Month. So I would like to acknowledge and thank everyone for their dedication in preservation and related topics. So this is Preservation Month. Congratulations.
There you go.
There you go. So may we please have the roll call?
Yes. Chair Huff,
Present.
Vice Chair Nelson,
Present.
Member Hanson,
Present.
Member Rosenau,
Here.
Member Bachman,
Present.
Member Hare,
Present.
and Member Marucci.
Here.
Member Moore.
Good, thank you. May we please have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall's bulletin board on the west side of Council Chambers and at the Planning Department in accordance with the city policies.
Very good. Does the board have any revisions to the agenda? Okay,
Actually,
Yes.
requested
Oh, yes.
revision to the agenda.
yes,
Towards the end, during staff comments, if we can reverse the order of the presentations. We can have Janet
Mhm.
present, and then we'll do the inventory updates.
Okay. All right. So we'll just reverse the order of the presentations. So may I have a motion with that request? I'll make the motion to switch those two presentations. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, super. So I have a motion by Catherine Huff and a second by Peter Maruzzi to shift the two presentations in under discussion. So is there any further discussion about the motion? Okay, so seeing none, I'm gonna call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so motion passes. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values all of your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on any items that are not posted on the agenda. So so there'll be 3 minutes assigned to anyone that would like to speak. Just a reminder that testimony for the public hearings, it will be taken later in the meeting according to the agenda. So staff, has anyone requested to comment on non-public hearing items or item that's not on the agenda?
No, we haven't received any public comments for items that are not on the agenda.
Okay, all right,
Um,
yes,
I believe there was a member of the public who was interested in making a public comment unless he plans to speak
for a
during
public
his hearing
hearing.
item.
So was there anyone that wanted to speak, outside of the agenda items or not included in the public hearing? Was there anyone? Okay, so so you can please, come on up.
Oh, now you want to do
Okay, is your comment regarding an item that's on the agenda?
it? I haven't really looked at the agenda, but I'm a 1996 owner of Mount Victoria Lodge. I'm an original owner.
Okay, that's on the agenda.
Oh, that's on the.
So you get a chance later on, okay? And are there agendas over there?
No.
No, okay, well, you just follow our instructions. We'll lead you along. Okay, so if there aren't any public comments. Then we're going to proceed to the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from April 2nd, 2024 Historic Site Preservation Meeting. Are there any revisions to the minutes of the meeting of April 2nd? Anybody? Okay. No revisions, so may I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 2?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay,
Second.
okay, so we have a motion by Janet Hansen and a second by Jeffrey Garrett. So is there any discussion about the motion about the minutes? Okay, so I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 7-0. Whoops, oh, I forgot, I have to abstain because I wasn't at that meeting. I was in Las Vegas. So I will abstain from the vote, just remember. Okay, so let us proceed to agenda item 2A, which is the public hearing section of the agenda. Now, this is the application by the Ocotillo Lodge Owners Association, represented by Chantel, for historic district designation of the Ocotillo Lodge, which is located at 1111 East Palm Canyon Drive. May we please begin with a staff report? Sarah?
All right, the first application before HSPB this evening was submitted by the Owners Association for the Ocotillo Lodge, which is located at 1111 East Palm Canyon Drive. As a condominiumized property, this application for designation is for a historic district. As seen in the aerial image to your left, Ocotillo Lodge is a collection of buildings that are both 1 and 2 story. It's zoned R3, which is a multifamily or hotel zoning, and the general plan designation for this area is for tourist resort commercial. The property is roughly 4 acres in size, and it is on reservation fee land. This requires the application to be forwarded to the tribe's historic preservation officer for recommendation, which it was, and no additional recommendations or comments were provided. HFPD did conduct site visits to the property to help understand the current condition of the property. These are some photos that were taken during that site visit. The one on the left shows the entry in the porte cochere, which also has the restored signage. We would like to quickly note that the photograph shown in the application was taken before the restoration of the sign, so it does not look like that in our package. However, subsequently, the homeowner or the owners association was able to restore that sign, so that is its current condition. And then the photo on the right was taken looking at the south elevation of the community pool, which has a distinctive keyhole shaped shape, and it's situated due south of what is known as the Candle Room. I'm sorry, the Candlewood Room. The property was originally constructed as a hotel, which was completed in 1957, adjacent to the Twin Palms tract, which was being developed for single-family homes at that time. The hotel was strategically placed in that location for potential home buyers, but it was also there to address the influx of tourists visiting Palm Springs during that era after the war. Later subdivided into a total of 124 individual condos in 1996. The property retains much of its original integrity from a site design and building design perspective. When we get into the code language related to historic nominations for districts, the property must meet the criteria listed in the section 8.05.090 of the municipal code. And it would be treated as a class 1 site in regards to alterations in the future And it must demonstrate exceptional historic significance by meeting the criteria and also the integrity findings. In the case of Ocotillo Lodge, the property meets criteria C as an intact example that reflects the local context and period through the use and design of the property. Criteria E as a work of 3 different masters and building masters and building builders of significance, namely Chrysler, the Alexanders, and Barrett Echo. And in criterion F, where the collection of all of the structures together as a district demonstrates its historical significance to the community. When it comes to the integrity of the site, the property maintains its original location and the design integrity is largely intact. The site placement related to the different building types and circulation plays a large part of the design, which is retained. Smaller details like the sconces and the replacement of jealousy windows were observed. However, much of the original building material seems to remain intact. The setting and spatial relationship between the site and the adjacent residential tract is still in place. And again, the material and workmanship can be observed when you're on the site. The feeling of a communal and pedestrian experience is still present. And the associations with that time period and the master designers are also seen. And all in all, the integrity of the site remains mostly intact. These photos that you see on the screen were actually taken from inside the Camden Wood Room. We didn't have an opportunity to come inside the first. Sorry, these next 2 slides are a little text heavy, not intended to be fully read, but these are the character defining features that were identified both in the staff report and in the draft resolution. As a district, there are many components that are identified as character defining features. The report calls out many of these features on page 19 of the report, and staff had compiled additional findings to that list. Again, all of this information is in the staff report as well as the draft resolution. Site design and architectural expression of the different buildings are key components. And some of the landscape elements which no longer exist were also part of the original design and have been included but notated. This is a continuation of the character defining features. You can see that last one there calls out the curved cabana and restroom structure with trellis, which was a Garrett Echo design that has subsequently been removed. And of course, we have a list of the non-contributing features and non-contributing elements to the property. This includes the security fencing that you see throughout the property, the pool fencing, and the 2 structures south of the main swimming pool, one of them being the Sunshine Bar, which is seen in this image. These were identified in the report as features that are not contributing. They were constructed at a later time, for a later date. The proposed district in total consists of 31 structures sited around that community open space that contains the keyhole shaped pool. Staff finds the property as it stands today meets the 3 criteria and the integrity findings. And therefore, in conclusion, we recommend HSBB support the request for district designation. With that, I can try and answer any questions related to the report. I believe the applicant team is also here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So does the board have any questions about this project from Sarah? Any questions? Member Hare?
Just one, Madam Chair. I should disclose that the HSR was done by Robert Chapel and Associates. I know Robert and used his firm for several projects in a former life, and that was prior to my retirement in 2020.
Okay. Good disclosure there. Thank you. So, yes.
I guess I have to do that too.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do that, I mean,
Member Hanson.
yeah, obviously Chattel worked a lot for the city of Los Angeles, so. Yeah, I mean, nothing since I've retired, so I think we're good.
Yeah, I think the important thing is it's been greater than 12 months since either of you have done business with the applicant, and that should be fine.
Well, I too did business. Actually, that was the applicant of the permanent evaluation, it's been a long time ago.
Okay.
It's a, it's a small preservation world here.
Yes, it is. So any other questions about the project, to Sarah? Any questions before we move on? Okay, so seeing no further questions of staff, I will now open the public hearing. So does the applicant or representative of the project wish to speak to tell us some more about the project? Is there? Who would, yes, okay, please, we welcome you and tell us more about the project if you like, and state your name, and you have 10 minutes to present. And then 2 minutes of rebuttal, if desired, after other public comments, so we welcome you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening, board members and staff. My name is Alvin Duval, and I'm an associate at Chattel Inc. As you know, we were the historic preservation consultants that worked on with the Ocotillo Lodge Owners Association on this project, on this prepare this nomination. Today, I'm joined in the audience by my colleague at Chattel, Christy Diorio, as well as several property owners at Ocotillo Lodge who are here both in person and virtually to show their support. First off, I just want to extend my thanks and gratitude to staff and the board for your review of the nomination. This has been in the works for a while, and we're very excited that the finish line is in sight. As you probably saw during your site visits to the property last week, Ocotillo Lodge is a really special place. And I'm glad we have a dedicated group of owners who really want to see the site preserved. And just from the audience tonight, I hope that you can see that as well. I don't have too much to add up to Sarah's presentation. So again, thank you for your review and consideration of the nomination.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. So now it's time for other public comments that would like to address this. So I invite the gentleman in the back to come forward. And please, state your name, and you have about 3 minutes.
So anyway, my name is Joseph Arbusco. I'm an original owner, 1996. So I've seen all the changes. And I've met actually a lot of board members virtually, right, in the last year or two. So I have no animosity against anybody here or the board members. But since I go back to 1996, I've seen a lot of changes, good and bad. Okay. And I did a little preparation here. And by the way, I like to use a little bit of comedy and whatever, to line things up. So when I do this, don't take things personal. Okay. My phone doesn't cooperate. That's being slow. Okay, I titled this, and again, a little bit of iteration here. It says condo versus museum. Okay, I'm being a little suspicious here. Okay. Actually, better with the glasses off. Homeowners, do we need a well-run condominium community versus a severely mismanaged museum as proposed here? I believe, and I know the impetus of reclassifying Ocotillo as a historical museum. Oops, I think that's flipped. Okay, hold on. As proposed here, I believe in as a historic museum is to attract more interest for like the Airbnbs, because a lot of people here are in Airbnb. Because Airbnb is currently using themed properties to generate new business. Yeah, as a sideline, they're doing like themed houses, like for Star Wars, like a family could come and stay in a beautiful, decorated house, just in the Star Wars theme. So it's kind of in that frame of mind that, I see that's one of the directions maybe this is going to. Okay. Okay, the problem with this assumption is that the assumption that Ocotillo Lodge is a hotel. Nothing could be further from the truth. Initially, Ocotillo Lodge was briefly provisioned as a hotel, but the many problems then and now forced us to make it a full-fledged condominium facility. Also, all the surrounding communities to Palm Springs banned the Airbnb type of, the temporary rentals. And Palm Springs has from what I understand, ordinance where you can have 15 to 20% of an allowable facility, which we are not, because again, we're condo. Our CCNRs allow only a minimum of 30 days a month, not the weekend rentals that are typically Airbnb rentals and other companies. And the 55 to 60 Ocotillo Lodge units that are currently participating in Airbnb, if allowed, approaches 50%, thus breaking both the CCNRs and Palm Springs short-term rental limits. Now, let's address the severely mismanaged Ocotillo Lodge. And again, I'm not saying present board, a lot of this goes back 6 years or more. So I said, up to approximately 6 years ago, we had a local condominium association. In other words, the last one we had before this one was in Texas, and the current one is based out of Arizona. Okay, so yeah, for deliberating here. Okay, and we also had a very a local board. Okay, a very fiscally responsible treasurer. That was Vicky Stein. I think she was treasurer for almost 15 or 16 years, who dealt with local vendors in a very integrous manner, keeping our expenses within our budget limits, maintaining a very robust reserve fund. Since that time, we've subjugated our representatives to out-of-state associations, like I just said, out-of-state run elections. The elections are based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Huge increases in our maintenance fees, a huge 1.4 million loan, and a tiny reserve fund by comparison to years ago. Back in the day, Vicky told me our reserve fund used to be about 350 to 400,000. From what I heard from one of the last meetings, I think we're down to 47,000 for the reserve fund. Okay. So anyway, about the Zoom calls. We're out of COVID, and I understand you want to keep doing, Zoom and all that, but we've got a beautiful meeting room. And it personalizes things, and we're homeowners, and especially us older homeowners, we really like to be in front of people, real people, and converse our concerns, directly with the board. So we should really go back to using that little meeting room, which is always available. And, that would be nice. Okay, so let's see. Let's get back to reality. Let's address the ever escalating homeowner dues. Currently, it's over $700. We have minimal facilities, a clubhouse, pool, and jacuzzis. That's it. Other properties in Palm Springs have multiple golf courses, large clubhouses, multiple pools, multiple staff, and they are paying much less than us. At this rate, in a few short years, because we've been having like 10, 15, 20% raises like the last 3 or 4 years, we will have $1,000 monthly assessments. We're homeowners, we own, but we're paying kind of rent. Many of the permanent Ocotillo residents are senior citizens like myself, on fixed incomes like myself. This amounts to elder abuse and while we are considering elder abuse, for all these inflated fees, we have no spread refuse collection. Seniors with walkers, and I'm corrected because I thought it was 2.5 acres. I just heard it were 4 acres. So these poor people with walkers and wheelchairs, and maybe they have bad hips or whatever, they've got to walk across a 4-acre property just to throw the garbage. And that's not.
Those are time's up.
Oh, time's up. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's about right. I'm almost at the end. So somebody wants to rebut me?
Thank you, Joseph, for your comments. We really appreciate your coming forth and telling us. So is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak in public comment about the Ocotillo Lodge? If so, just please, I welcome you to come forward. So please come forward and give us your name and address. And you have 3 minutes also.
Thank you very much. I feel I should disclose that I also know Robert Chattel. Matthew Dillhofer, 487 Desert Lakes Drive, neighbors down the street to the Ocotillo Lodge. I'm actually here today to support the nomination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have
Sure.
anyone, oops,
Can I have you sign
Oh,
this?
Matthew, come and sign your life away.
Since I'm on video.
Yes, right. Okay, so is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward and comment on this project? Anyone else?
I would like to point out that there's folks in the Zoom who are interested in speaking as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, good, good. Yeah. See, I have my, there it is over there. Okay, so please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Anthony Bardero and I own a unit at the Ocotillo Lodge. I'm also currently serving as the HOA board president. If we get historic designation, then I won't be able to paint my bedroom whatever color I want. I'll have to go back and replace the windows that I replaced before and make them original. And we can buy our own plaque. These were some of the weird things that we heard when we went and tried to approach our community about historic designation, things that we had to rebuff along the way. I'm very pleased to let you know that when we took this vote 2 years ago, we needed 64 votes to get past 51% of ownership so that we could continue with this process. And we wound up with 64 votes. Now you could say, well, okay, that's 51%, but actually it was 64 votes for, 25 against, and 2 abstaining. Therefore, if you do the math of the people who voted, we had 70% of our owners wanted this historic designation. I'm here to speak sort of on their behalf as well, to make sure that their voice is heard. We have entered over the last several years a new era of ownership and owners who are in the complex because they appreciate the history of it and the architecture of it. And therefore, we wound up with this vote to proceed. On behalf of the current HOA board, thank you for pointing out the sign restoration. We're very proud of that. We also did a project not too long ago where we had to paint the complex, as you do every 5 or 10 years here in the desert. And we did extensive research into the original color palette, and we utilized that as well. What's next? Well, it'd be awesome if we could do something with that old Candlewood room. You know, that's down the road. We have to figure that out. We have some work to do in there. But thank you very much for considering historic designation. And on behalf of a vast majority of owners, thank you, and we look forward to that.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Vice Chair?
I have
Yeah.
I have a comment for you before you leave the table. Thank you again for kindly meeting us there and showing us around. That was very helpful. Especially with the particular side of it, to see some of the intricate details. And I know I had asked you if you knew what the original light fixtures next to the unit door looked like. So in pouring over this report and looking at the historic images in Appendix B, I found them and they were in fact white double cone fixtures. There's an image here from the Garrett Expo Archive, 1958, and you can see behind the old curved trellis, in fact, a white double cone fixture. So I congratulate you or whoever was in charge of that for getting that detail right, because sometimes light fixtures are lost to the ages, and if someone just took their best guess, they got it right.
Jay, that's fantastic news. Thank you for that update. Curtis was the person who led that charge to replace the sconces. Did you know that was the original style? Okay, he did know that. No, I didn't.
Yeah, we dug through many photos, and so we found it kind of like hidden, so yeah.
Good.
That was the goal.
Anything else from anybody?
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone in the audience that would that's seated here that would like to come forward and make any comments about Ocotillo Lodge? So then the Zoom, Sarah and David, do we have any names submitted on Zoom?
We do.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Stark, you are free to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. This is Katie Horak, and I am an owner at Ocotillo Lodge in Unit 301. And thank you so much, Chair Huff, and to the board for hearing this item. It's really exciting to be at this moment. And thank you also to Sarah for your excellent staff report and to Chattel for the designation report. So I'm truly so sorry I can't be there in person tonight with all of my fellow Ocotillians and to see all of you in person, but I want to make a very brief statement. And I don't think that there's any disputing how significant Ocotillo Lodge is to the architectural story of Palm Springs. If anything, I think many just assume it is already designated when they drive by. However, as you know, it can be very difficult to get 120-something owners to agree on just about anything. And I'm so proud to be amongst a community of owners at this moment who agree on historic preservation as a value and the importance of preserving our iconic property. So I think you can tell that Ocotillo Lodge is really having a moment. You can see it in the restoration of our original sign and in those double cone light fixtures and in the more historically compatible paint palette. And you can really feel it in the community who is taking so much pride in our architectural legacy. However, we can't be sure that all future owners will feel the same way that we do, which is why it is so important that we be protected with historic district status. So thank you so much for helping us achieve this important designation. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other Zoom speakers? We see any?
No other requests this week, Madam Chair?
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. So seeing no further speakers on this item, I will close the public hearing. So next, the action is now with the board. This is the time for comments and questions and further discussion. So I'd like to invite any comments from the board. Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's really a question for the HOA. When we did the site visit, I noticed at the Coco Share entry, and forgive me if this was in the report, it was very long. I tried to read every last word. But on the west facade, as you're facing the building, the charcoal wall to the right, closer to the mountain, the end of it, the blocks are broken off. And you know how the original design, some of the blocks stuck out. And you can see where they were broken over time, either by garbage trucks or what have you. And also on that side, there's a palm tree that is literally married to the wall, like that palm tree growing right onto the wall. So those are obviously things that kind of sacrifice or could possibly sacrifice that original character branding, integrity, not to mention structural integrity. So just wondering if those have been identified as problems to address in the future to either repair, restore, or correct. If not, you don't have to say now, but it's just something I thought I would bring to your attention, which I'm sure you're already aware of.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. So we know.
Sorry, we need to. My name
is Curtis Skipper, I am the VP of the HOA. So those items have not been brought up, so thank you very much for bringing those up, because now we know. We do have our eyes on a few other things, like restoring the porpoise share. There's little notches that were cut out, so we're considering filling those back in. As Tony said, the candlewood room, we want to restore it, just very close to what it was, in the past. And there's all these little things that we definitely want to restore, so, but we'll keep that in mind.
My suggestion would be, once you qualify for the Mills Act, you can use some of that money to make those little changes.
Exactly, so that's actually not part of the goal as well.
Thank you.
So, not the only goal, but yeah. And I guess since I'm here, I just want to also voice my support for it. You know, a lot of the community, the architectural committee, We have Modernism Week Committee, we raised a lot of funds to restore the building, so, I guess what I'm trying to say is that a big chunk of the community is really stepping up and, trying to preserve the property, so, and we all live it there, so.
Good,
Thank you.
thank you, thank you very much. Are there any other board comments or discussion? Any other board? Member Hanson?
Chip.
Well, in my many decades of preservation experience, I have a technical term I use for properties like this, and it's called a no-brainer. So, yeah, this obviously meets designation criteria in several, for several themes and context of the citywide historic context statement. I wanted to acknowledge the Chattel report, which is extremely thorough, and also is a really good model for how these reports should be structured and written. And we just happen to have some training that's coming up, this tonight and two more meetings, in which we're gonna talk about the use of the citywide survey and context statement. And I'll probably use this as an example. But also wanted to congratulate you all on, getting a critical mass of people to support this. Believe me, I know it's not easy. But yeah, I fully support the nomination. The only question I have, Sarah, is with regard to the character defining features. And I know you had a really long list of them. These character defining features are part of the resolution that goes to city council. And I'm wondering if, and maybe you all have some thoughts, the Chattel report, actually starting on page 19 all the way through 26, had a really good list of sort of general character defining features, but then they also had a site map that identified contributing and non-contributing, and for each of those numbers, there was a set of character defining features. And I think, I don't know, to me, this was really well organized and easy to follow versus a long list. Plus, I think the purpose of these is also to help staff in the future evaluate alterations to properties. Is there a way that this could be an appendix or an attachment to a resolution, or is that not typically done?
I don't think we've seen that typically done, but I would say that, including that as an appendix, that could be done as a resolution. You can call that out as part of the description. I'm looking at the language here, and what we could do is put in an asterisk and say,
Yeah.
we're referencing the exhibits based on the report.
With, more detail. And then I was also gonna suggest that, in the summary of why the property is significant, poor Garrett Echo gets kind of like, the report mentions Garrett. I was like, maybe we could just add in a few more strong words. I know you do say at the end of that paragraph that he's a recognized master as a landscape architect, but there was substantial information about him. And maybe just give him a little bigger of a nod in your summary in the resolution.
Which section is that?
It was, I don't have the resolution in front of me.
Okay.
It was in the discussion of the criteria.
Okay, so under
The work of a master.
criterion E.
That was just such a little brief mention of Garrett.
So just to add in a little bit more.
Just a little more
detail.
emphatic, or just even the wording a little more emphatic than the report reference. It recognizes even, that word.
Very good, thank you. They're excellent comments, and I agree. It was a fabulous report, and I to support very much. Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you. Further to what Member Hanson said regarding the numbered appendix, I think that would also be a great future model for the historic districts if they could provide the list of defining features that way, because it makes it a lot easier for us, along with the actual listing. So maybe that's something we could require in future district applications.
Good, okay, other comments, anyone? No, okay, good. So, seeing no further discussions on this project, may I please move forward and ask for a motion from the board? Somebody, yeah.
Everybody's looking at me. Okay, where are we?
motion. Resolution.
Recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I move that the Historic Preservation Board recommend to City Council to adopt resolution HSPB number 154, a resolution of the Historic Site Board of the City of Palm Springs recommending that City Council designate Ocotillo Lodge at 1111 East Palm Canyon Drive as a historic district, subject to the conditions.
Second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, so, so we have a motion by, Janet Hanson and a second by Jade Nelson. So is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, as so wonderfully stated, say aye.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Nobody opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-0. Motion passes. So let us proceed.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming by. So let us proceed next to agenda item 2B under public hearings. And this is an application by Todd Hayes for the historic designation of the Albert Frey Bell Vista home number 3, located at 1150 North Cali Roll. So may we please have the staff report to begin? Sarah.
Yes. Very exciting when you have that. All right, moving on to the next project for review. This next project is a request for historic landmark designation of the residence located at 1150 North Cairo. This is HSPB case number 156. So this is a single family home located in the R1C residential zone district with a general plan designation for very low density residential. The home is one of 15 affordable homes that were constructed in the Bell Vista tract. Completed in 1946, this floor plan for the home was quite simple. Originally, the floor plan had 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and a single carport. The floor plan was used for this tract. And it was designed by the architect Albert Frey. The single floor plan was flipped and rotated and utilized the setbacks to create a level of variation within the tract. And that created variation for each home. As you can see in this image, the home has been restored in a way that the historic characteristics remain in place. Here you're able to also see the minor addition that was made to the home in the 1970s, and that was to add that second bathroom. So in accordance with the Historic Preservation Ordinance, a Class 1 landmark should demonstrate exceptional historic significance and meet the listed criteria and also meet the integrity findings. In the case of Frey's Bell Vista home number 3, the property and the home as it exists today meets criterion 2, 3, and 5. The property is also a part of a rare example of wartime housing that was constructed with government funding. The property meets all of the integrity findings, including design intent and workmanship. Many of the utilitarian details are preserved and the original materials still exist on the home. I think we were all able to witness that at our site visit. The home uses simple design details that have been restored. The carport and the driveway were shown on the original site plan. I believe that the current owner did restore the curved driveway. The original site design and the floor plan also showed the rectilinear block wall. It was one of the items that were customizable that we saw on the sheets, some drawings. This particular home was built with the square block wall, where others utilized a curved wall. And then some of the non-contributing elements that we saw were related to modern upgrades such as the new HVAC system and the ductwork on the roof, the PV panels, there was a newly installed corrugated metal fence. The swimming pool is newer as well, and then of course the 1972 bathroom addition that enclosed one of the rear porches. The two of the Bell Vista homes have been designated class 1 sites. This is Bell Vista home number 3. It was identified as likely the last one left with enough integrity in its tract. In its current condition, the home meets 3 criteria and the integrity findings. The current owner, Tom Hayes, restored and submitted the application requesting the designation of this property. And staff does recommend that HSPD adopt this resolution, HSPD number 156, supporting class 1 designation of the property at 1150 North Coyote. Any questions about the staff report? I'm happy to answer that. I believe Todd is also here answering questions.
Okay. Does the board have any questions of staff at this moment? Any questions of Sarah or David? Okay, so seeing no further questions of the staff, I will open the public hearing. And does the applicant Todd Hayes wish to speak and tell us anything else about the property that you'd like to know, like us to know about? And just for the record, Todd, if you'll state your real name and your address. And then you have 10 minutes if you want that much time, and 2 minutes of rebuttal if so desired. Okay, Todd.
My name is Todd Hayes. I am both the owner and the applicant. Thank you all for your time and consideration. I have a short prepared statement that I'll read. It's easiest for me. The 15 homes are originally built in Albert Frey's Bell Vista tract represent one of the most important projects of Frey's career, along with architects Gregory A. Quincy Jones and Whitney Smith. Albert Frey was responsible for building one of the earliest tracts of modern housing in the state. Just like the illustrations presented in Frey and Coker's 1931 article, Frey's Bell Vista finally realizes his vision to build a singular home design on lots flipped, turned, and rotated with various setbacks. Based on the design that Frey did in 1934, Bell Vista embodies his ideas about low-cost, simple, and mass-produced housing that he first theorized back when he was doing the Illuminaire House. And it was this, and all this was made possible because Frey was introduced to Culver and Sally Nichols, who were important to Palm Springs history in their own right. And the 3 of them shared a dream of building affordable post-war housing in Palm Springs. Only 15 Bell Vista homes were ever built, and it's important that we protect as many of these houses as we possibly can. Having studied, restored, and lived in 3 of these houses for almost 12 years now, I can tell you firsthand how shockingly different, even at times disorienting, these identical houses were from one another. While they all had the exact same floor plan, when you flip it and rotate it and change the setback, they truly become different houses. It's not just that they're visually different from the street, but also when walking inside, it feels like you're walking into a totally different house. Frey's idea was brilliant, simple, and very cost-effective. At a time when affordability and speed of construction of workforce housing was critical, Frey was finally able to implement an idea he first had back in 1931. For all of these reasons, it's important that we protect as many of these houses as we possibly can, so this part of Frey's genius and this part of Palm Springs history can be preserved for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Wonderful. And I thank you for your dedication, your hard work, those 3 houses, and we really appreciate your dedication.
Thank you.
So are there any other speakers who wish to speak on this project? And do we have anybody in Zoom on this project?
No request to speak, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Okay, seeing no further speakers on this item, I will close the public hearing. And the next action is now with the board. So are there any comments or further discussions or questions from the board? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Member Lucy?
Thank you very much. I wrote the National Register multi-property submission for Albert Frey. And I'm so pleased that there are 3 of these important houses that have somehow survived with a high level of integrity. Am I correct, Mr. Hayes, that you added this house to the National Register nomination?
Yes,
And that's already been approved?
yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Oh, that's important to
So,
mention.
yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm of course very supportive of this. It's wonderful that something that was so modest survived out of 15, at least 3, that's okay. And is available for the public to see at some point, because, you know, many people associate Palm Springs with just exclusive housing. And, this is an example where that's not the case. So anyway, I strongly support the nomination.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board? Member Hanson?
Yeah, I think that Peter makes a good point, you know, it is certainly a work of Albert Frey and it's all about architecture, but it really is more of a story than that. Tells a larger story about you know, sort of experimental, smaller housing, more affordable housing, which I actually did not know even existed in Palm Springs. But there's, you know, we don't have a criteria for, I love this house, you know, I do believe that it absolutely meets the city's criteria. And it was also heard before the state commission, which I'm on, the National Register nomination. It was great to see it then, but it was lovely to be able to, and thank you so much for letting us go inside. Honestly, I've been thinking about this house ever since I went in. I just think it's so charming, it's so lovely. And I'm gonna keep my eye out for when things go on the market. You stay there as long as you can. But anyway, so I fully support the nomination.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Vice Chair Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Todd, having grown up 2 blocks away in the 600 block at Paseo de Anta and meeting Albert Frey when he was alive, I became aware of these homes as a young person in my teens. And used to ride my bike up and down that street all the time, wondering about those houses and admiring how far they were set back and knowing that there must have been something special about them. So meeting Albert, he said that he had designed it, but he was very modest, you know, as you knew. And what I find so intriguing is that when they were built, White House 1 was literally around the corner. So he probably could have walked over and checked on the progress every day. And since White House 1 is gone now, it's so great that we still have this street and these homes. And you are truly, like everyone has said, a champion for Frey. So you definitely deserve a lion's share of credit for bringing this into the public eye and for all of your hard work. So thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, well, seeing no further comments or questions, may I please have a motion? Okay, and what's the motion?
That's my,
State the motion.
glasses on now.
Put on your.
I move to accept the application by Todd Hayes for historic designation for the Albert Frey Bella Vista Home number 3 located at 1150 North Cali Ralph, case 156.
Okay. And do we accept this staff report on that? Are we supposed to state that
And accept the staff's report on it.
on that? Yeah, good, good. We have a motion by Member Rosenau. May we have a second?
I'd be glad to second that.
Okay, a second by Peter Morosi. So, now, is there any discussion about that, about the motion? Are we good? Okay. So, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Alright,
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, moving along. There is no unfinished business today, so let us proceed to agenda item 4A, which is new business. So we have a request by Jane Townsend and Luca Serta for approval of a major alteration of a class 3 site located at 2805 Anza Trail. May we please have a staff report on that?
So the last application for review today is a request for a major alteration to a class 3 site. The address is 2805 Anza Trail. The property was identified by staff in 2021 as having the potential to be designated and added to class 3 list. So the lot, as it's located, is in the R1B residential zone district, which requires a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. The general plan designation for this area is also very low density residential. The original home that is located on this site was built around 1930 and was constructed on a lot that was approximately 1.25 acres before it was subdivided. In 2023, City Council did approve a lot split, which divided the property. In the image you see on the screen here, the red line demarcates the area where the lot was split into parcel 1 and parcel 2. As a condition of part of that approval, the owner was required to remove the ancillary building that is located in the setback. And it was required to be removed as part of that approval. And as a result of the lot split, the existing home was located on parcel 2, and the class 3 designation or class 3 status went to parcel 2. So these are some images of the site visit that was conducted by HSBB prior to this meeting. During the site visit, additional elements such as a gate and a rock stack well were found on parcel 1, but these features were not referenced nor found to be significant in their current state. The feature that was called out for potential eligibility was the house itself. And again, therefore, that class 3 status was maintained on parcel 3. As you can see in the images on the screen, the surrounding property was undeveloped and the desert landscape was left to mature and overgrow on site. The home, as you see in this image here, was recently vacated. And it is in a state which will eventually require it to be updated for it to be inhabited once again. The home is a conventional build. It was built using what appears to be stacked stone for the foundation up to the middle part of the wall. Beyond the rock wall, you can also see that a lot of salvaged material was used. The windows, I believe, were taken out recently. And there are various amounts of non-code compliant upgrades that were made to the home. So when we evaluate the changes that are made to the class 3 site, the code language does ask that the agency review the project to determine if the project should be stayed to proceed with historic designation proceedings, or if the project should be allowed to move forward and determine that it doesn't meet the criteria for designation. In the case of this project, while the scope of work does trigger major alteration due to the construction of a new building that is larger than the existing home, ironically, the project does not physically impact the 1930 structure. It's actually proposed to be distanced approximately 50 feet away from the existing structure and situated towards the rear of the lot. The adjacent lot parcel 2 is already in process for a new single family home to be developed. The factor of the lot split, the parcel was sold and is now going through building permit for a new home to be constructed. While there's potential for this lot to meet the criteria, specifically criteria number 3, And potentially some of the integrity findings that does find that more research does need to be conducted. And as part of the integrity findings, the current state of the existing home, is one that's in disrepair and would require further in-depth analysis to see what sort of integrity findings could be met. Again, the choices that HSCD have for reviews such as these is to state a project, for moving forward and proceeding with the understanding that there is a potential for redesignating, reclassifying the property as either a class 1 or class 2 site, or allowing the project to move forward, with findings that say that it's insufficient to reclassify at this time. Given the current condition of the project and the proposed alterations of the site, staff actually recommends that no action be taken on this particular project, with the understanding that a major alteration to the building itself would reinitiate a review for major alteration to a class 3 site. Again, this is a little bit of a unique situation in that the actual construction that's being proposed is distance and not physically impacting the resource or the existing building. The owner at this time is not seeking for historic designation. She has, however, represented that there is an intent to keep the building and to utilize it and rehab it in the near future. The owner is here to answer any sort of questions related to the project itself. I'm also happy to answer questions related to the staff report.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the board have any questions of Sarah at this point? Vice Chair Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two things. The first being, with regard to setting the evaluation of historic integrity. You specify in report that the current development standards allow for increased density through subdivisions and lot split. Many of which the surrounding properties have pursued. That may be true, but this doesn't seem to be fairly high density street, so to speak. And then it further says the setting and pattern of development had changed from historic setting. That is certainly true. However, this particular lot truly retained its original setting. So that is clearly obviously very important. And the archway at the street entrance, I'm concerned about, because that is not part of this particular lot, but it is tied into setting, because it is indicative of the early neighborhood and of the spirit of the pioneers and that whole Palm Springs feeling. So, you know, some comparable examples might include the stone markers in Orloff Thomas or the Mesa Gatehouse, things that are really valuable to the identity of those neighborhoods. And I would argue that this stone arch is important to the identity of and the trail, given that Jane Lincoln Park lived literally right next door. And her father was one of our town pioneers. So I take some issue with that particular description in the report, because I do think that it's important to retain the aspects of the existing setting as much as possible. The second thing is a question really regarding construction fencing. And I guess I want to know if it's going to go down the driveway and around the back of the current existing historic resource, so as to help protect it from any possible unforeseen incidents with construction workers or construction vehicles, because that kind of stuff has happened in the past. So those are my only concerns really with anything here tonight. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board of Sarah? Member Hanson?
I do. I have a question with regard to the lot split that's already been done. Was that a discretionary action? A lot split?
Yes. Yes, that was a decision made by the planning commission.
So but there was no assessment of the lot before the lot split as a potential historical resource.
I don't recall exactly what it was, but I presume it was a categorical exemption.
Hmm.
It wouldn't be discretionary, would it?
Well, it's a typical exemption, but I don't know. I mean, I know that's already sort of done. I was just curious, since it seems to me like it might have been the opportunity to do an assessment at that point in time. Because then for that project and this one, we would understand what the property is and what it does represent, but that's, you know, in the past. And Sarah, you had mentioned during your presentation that you felt that staff needed more information to assess, but you're still recommending to take no action. I was a little confused.
Yeah, so in regards to the criteria related to number 3, where so typically with these applications, there's kind of a limited amount of information that's provided. Given what we have, I think there's opportunity for more information to be revealed. However, staff doesn't feel that it warrants it at this time to be staged and designated.
And also, is the new project discretion?
New project doesn't go through the planning department process, it only goes through the building department process.
Okay, Peter Morosi.
Yeah, I'm still trying to better understand the staff report. It says on page 3, criteria and findings for possible redesignation of class 3 building. So you put that in there, and then 2A, you say, but more information is needed to determine if it retains exceptional historic significance. And then 2A1, based on the information provided in the application. I'm just confused about the application itself. I mean, it's not really the responsibility of the property owner to do all the research for their, for their application. Wouldn't it be something that it would be done by a third party or at least by the staff? So that's the question. And then also, it says based on the list of past owners provided in the application, so you can't really rely on that. Because it says more investigation will be required to evaluate the resource to determine if criterion 3 is met. And it says also in one of your sentences, there are no distinctive construction methods of building materials. But this is made of rock. It's not masonry. So to me, that's a very distinctive construction method. And there's other things about the application implies that Charles Boss from San Diego built the house, but we don't really know. So to me, there's not enough information to conclude that the property only meets criterion 3. It might meet criterion 2, it might meet criterion, I think 5. Well, maybe not 5. Definitely 4. Embodies distinctive characteristics of a type, period of or method of construction. So my point is, I don't think there's enough information for us to just say, well, we'll deal with this later if there's some request to do something with the house. So I don't feel comfortable saying that I wouldn't request additional information, even if it was just to put this on pause and have a qualified architectural historian do that research. At least we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, so let me go back to the staff report and provide a little bit more rationale behind how this one came about. Related to class, for criterion 4, where it talks about distinctive methods of construction. Typically when we review that, we're looking for new technology or something that is different in terms of a construction method. And so in that regard, the determination was it's not distinctive and that it's not kind of a new method of construction that was used. And so that's why the staff analysis was that it didn't meet that criterion.
Can I just ask, what if it had been constructed with Adobe? You'd say, well, it's not a new, I mean, it goes back hundreds of years.
Right, well, and again, I think, that's kind of where, like you had mentioned, the reports. Kind of delve into the conventional materials and the construction method, if it was something that was. More common for that time period. In regards to condition 3, and again, this was a bit of a challenging, report. In that there. Typically, when you look at these reports, we make the determination that there is no historic significance, and then we pretty much remove it from the class 3 list. In this instance, the proposed project doesn't pose a direct impact to the resource, and so our recommendation is to review any sort of change that will be made on the physical building. As we keep it on the class 3 list and review it, when it comes, and that may be the point, and we can, require more information and look for its designation. So I think it's a matter of just planting it on the line, based on the application that we have.
Any other questions from the board at this point? Vice Chair Nelson?
Just one more question that just popped up for me. This was the class 3 site prior to the lot split. It must have been on the survey. And if so, was it in the eligible properties list?
It's, yeah, so the class 3 list is, potential eligible properties.
So that being said, that fosters the argument that really it should come before HSPB before any lot split was entertained and approved.
Yeah, and
Seems like,
when it's related to the law split, because there's no proposed development at that time, it doesn't really trigger our review. It's only when there's proposed development on the site where it would, we would look for its classification either as a minor or future development.
thank you.
Mhm. Okay, are there any other questions of staff before we proceed? And anybody else? Questions? Okay, so does the applicant wish to speak? We would welcome you to come forward. Jane Townsend. Jane, we'd like to hear what you have to say about the project and any comments that you would like to address this board. And for this, you have 3 minutes. And anything you want to share for our consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate all your questions. The plan is to leave the old house as it is now and to build a new house quite a distance away and eventually address the old house later after the new house is built. We're very conscious of the neighborhood. The reason that I bought it was because of the neighborhood and because of the beauty and the charm of the area. And the people who bought the front lot are with us also, and they also have bought it for the same reason. They have taken out a lot of the cactus, but they preserved it. Some of the key cactus are in pots that have been preserved. A great ocotillo has been preserved in the, and that's our goal. The entry, that's being preserved and will be integrated into the plan, that we all have a sense of the area. And the reason we want to live there is because of that neighborhood. I know that a letter has been written objecting to this, and I just wanted to say that while a historian did not look at this property, I am an investigative news reporter, and I looked into all of the, I had won national awards for my investigative capabilities, and I looked into whatever data I could find. It was the survey, the Palm Springs survey. I looked at old records of who bought it. I suspect the house was probably not built in 1930 because the land was transferred several times after that. So I suspect it was built maybe in 1940. It's not really a rock house. The woman who has lived there for 30 years had an engineer come in, and it's a frame house that rock has been pasted onto the front. It was not constructed as a solid rock house. There are some low walls that are the rock, and that was added on later. That was a porch originally. And they put in the windows and it's had quite a few changes over time, but I still love it. It's still a great, charming house, and I want to keep it, even if it's not a real rock house. I think, the lot, in as many ways as possible, we're preserving the cactus. Before anything is done, a lot of the cactus has been roped off to be preserved. Some of the cactus that is there has already been donated to the Prescott, what's it called? The Prescott, Preserve. And also some is going to be donated to the Moreton, cactus garden location as well, because I don't know if it's that valuable, but it sure is pretty. So, that's the plan for the lot. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I just have one question for the people who purchased your other lot. You said the Octio is being preserved. Does that mean it's being dug up and put in a pot for? And how will that? I just wonder if it'll survive that.
Actually, Ocotillo is amazing. They dig those up and they just lay them on the ground in many places and they last. This one has been put in a pot and also attached to a tall tree to make sure, because it's so tall, to protect it so that the wind doesn't blow it. And they've taken I have photographs if you want to see they've really, and also there are several tall barrel cactus. I don't know if they're barrel cactus, but
Oh, yeah, it's a real tall.
yeah, and those have been preserved.
That
as
must
well.
be 150 years
I
old.
think so, and the Ocotillo as well.
Mhm.
Kudos, thank you.
Good. So are there any other questions or further discussions? So with the old little house, you're gonna preserve it and use it just as are you gonna have a use for it? Or just as a place to visit, outdoor party house for the neighborhood? What do you?
And we're invited.
So, what do you said you'll deal with it after your house is built, your dream house. So maybe you could just talk about how are you gonna deal with it?
The woman who's lived on the lot for 30 years loves it and wants to stay there. And her dream is to, once I get my house built, is to turn that into an ADU and she would move back into the house. She wants to actually do the improvements to live there. She's, it's been her home for 30 years and it's part of her DNA, I think. And so that's the long-term goal is, but to have an ADU, you have to have a DU to be adjacent to. So, get the new house built and then turn that into an ADU. And that's the goal.
Okay, Jennifer here.
Just one more question. I was really pleased to see that a lot of the cacti was being preserved in situ, and I admire the ropes or the tape that you put up. Do you intend to do anything to enhance that against construction issues?
Actually, I've already bought the orange snow fence so that nobody can miss it. The blue tape doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Some of it's already blown away, but we have the orange snow fence that will, all around the old house will be protected, all the cactus that's there now, and then along the wall. And that, fortunately, where the house is planned, it's right in the middle where there's nothing. There's a wonderful Palo Verde that doesn't have to be touched. There's a desert willow that doesn't have to be touched. The tamarisk doesn't have to be touched. It's mainly just a little bit of creosote in the center that will come out, and the rest of it around it will stay. And the landscaping is also going to be very kind of Joshua Tree, meets Palm Spring, very, not tailored, not. I don't know how to describe it.
Not formal.
Right, yes, not formal for sure.
Vice Chair Nelson?
Thank you. Just a quick question for staff while you're here. Thank you. So later on down the road after the new house is completed, the DU. Same applicant, same owner will come forward and make an application for improvement to the ADU. And that would then come before this board.
Correct. That would be their recommendation, and again, it is a little bit non-traditional in that we wouldn't necessarily let the entire property go. It's when, in fact, came to that existing identified, home is when it would come back as a major alteration before HSD.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, we've received a letter. Can you, tell us about that, address that? Thank you, Jane. You're welcome to stay there if you want,
If you would like.
yeah, if there's another question that might come up, whatever you choose.
So we did receive a letter, just, a few hours before the meeting, that was scheduled by Mark, Lumen. That email was circulated to all of the board members. Just wanted to make sure you all had a moment to read, and had your opportunity to look at that. Email, it will be entered into the record as public comment. I believe he's also on, the Zoom call. I'm not sure if he is wishing to speak. And he did provide, a note here saying, that the gate in the front has already been removed. There are certain small scale things that have been changed on the adjacent parcel. So I guess we wanted to make note of that so that the board was aware. Do we have to read the letter into the record? Okay. Unless the board wants the letter to be read into the record.
Is there, any comments, regarding this letter that the board received?
Well, I'll have a comment, but not at the moment.
Okay, but, we'll follow.
Yeah, after the public hearing.
Yeah, sure, that would be fine. So, okay, and was there any other further discussions, any other questions? Pertaining, this, issue? Anybody? Yeah, right. So seeing no further questions, may I, please have a motion?
No, we won't have discussion.
Further discussions. Okay, that's time.
Once you close the public hearing, right?
This is not a public hearing.
Oh.
This is new business.
Sorry
I mean,
about that. I
this,
apologize.
that's okay. This is a new business. Yes,
Right.
we're in new business. We're not hearing.
You're absolutely
The
correct.
judge is not-
I am
No,
embarrassed.
Sorry.
no problem.
I-
I keep saying, are there further discussions?
Yes.
About
Yes,
this?
there are.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
Did you want?
which, who wants to go first?
I mean, I can go for
Okay,
sure.
Peter.
I mean, I felt this letter was quite compelling. A couple sentences just stood out to me. A site such as this is very rare in Palm Springs. And its features and related modest vernacular desert residents may shed useful information about the early settlement of the Arabi tract. And says, at a minimum, please require historic resource evaluation by a qualified historian. Be prepared before any further steps are taken with the project. And I think that is a reasonable request, because at the very longest, it would be 120 days to commission a architectural review. And we'd learn a lot more about it and feel more comfortable about making a decision. At least that's my opinion. And it's not gonna be, isn't it 120 days is the standard? Unless it's extended another 60 days, whatever.
120 days.
I mean, is that a reasonable amount of time to get this done?
To get a report.
Yeah.
That would be the standard. Time.
So that's my thought. I just think we don't know enough about the setting. We don't know enough about that area. To me, that has been added to this discussion. So I don't know, I'm just feeling comfortable. I'm not against the idea. I just would like to know more before we would decide.
So who would be able to do a historic, resource evaluation in that period of time?
Sure. So if the board, of the two decisions decides to stay the project, it's essentially to proceed with, the designation process. The city has 4 on-call consultants that we would, bid out to, and they would be selected to write the report.
Okay. Member Hanson?
Yeah, I just want to follow up to what Peter had just said. I think what concerns me is even going back to the lot split. You know, when they surveyed this property and it was listed in the inventory, they were looking at the whole property. They weren't just looking at that house in a vacuum. And now we're wanting to put it in a vacuum. And we've already separated part of the property now from the resource, and then we're gonna further separate it. And I feel the same way that, that it seems like a really interesting early history of Palm Springs, that area, kind of like the sort of hippie pioneers of the 20s, And I feel like I need more information as sort of the totality of the property and how that one building contributes to the property as a whole. Not just, it's like taking a farmhouse and we're gonna move it out of the farm and put it on another street. It's not a farmhouse anymore. So I feel like I also would like to see the report prepared. But I do have a question. It perplexes me, and maybe this is for a whole different meeting. When cases like this or situations like this come up, the idea that we're proceeding with designated, why can't it just be an eligibility report? And I know it's stated that way in the ordinance, is it? Maybe that's something we think about later because, the property owner may not ever want to designate the property. But we would still, the information we need is just, is it or isn't it eligible? We don't necessarily say, we want you to designate your property a class 1 or 2 resource, but, that's probably a discussion for another time, but I think, I just want to make sure we're following procedures and, doing our job.
I completely agree. It seems very strange. I don't understand why the ordinance is written this way, that to get more information, you have to potentially designate it. They don't want that. I don't understand why we should have to do that. Now, obviously, that seems to be part of the process. We can't change that. But to follow this through, we receive a report. We say, well, there's important information here. Thank you very much. We don't think it's eligible for class 1. So we have to make it conclude. We have to conclude based on this information. So we can't get more information. We have to say this qualifies for designation. That's just absurd. Quite honestly. And I haven't been on the board very long, but I realized to get more information, you have to actually nominate the building.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I
That's
think we
crazy.
should all have a good discussion about that in another meeting, because it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
And I'm not implying that this should be the time to designate it. I just want to know more.
Right.
So
And
I guess we can't get more information unless we,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of in a quandary here.
Yeah.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, Member Rosendahl.
So if a stay is put on and we do a report, that's gonna cost money.
Mhm.
Does that come out of the same budget as our work plan and everything else, or is that a separate pocket of?
No, that comes out of the planning fund. Yeah. Mhm.
What's the plan?
The same, it's the same account that we use for other nominations, so we come out of that same bucket.
Is that a threat?
Member Hare.
I'm in a quandary as well, except the interesting thing to me is that I came to the meeting feeling as though this should be a stay, and I flipped on that. Janet and Peter have mentioned some very pertinent things, none of which we seem to be able to have much control over, or at least not tonight. And I will just say that I was very impressed by your presentation and your explanation. And so my feeling is that we're depending on the kindness of strangers in a way here to do the right thing. And maybe that's the best we can do at this particular point. And I'm willing to be persuaded one way or the other.
Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to agree with the observation so far. However, I do a semi deep dive into some of the information that Jane had presented in terms of the names. To my usual sources, like newspapers.com and NSF3 and the local phone book, and I kept coming to dead end. With you as an award-winning investigative reporter and me as kind of a resident historian having a hard time, and the fact that this wasn't built as a rock house. You know, for me, the important thing really is the stone arch and the well. I think those speak a lot more to the heritage of Anza Trail than a pseudo stone house that may or may not have been. And then clearly the little dwelling in the back is not significant whatsoever. But I wonder if you or anyone in this room knows if there was another structure further up, because it feels to me like with that well there and the archway out there at the front, that it could possibly at some point in time been another structure that we don't know about. So I am not inclined to hold this up any longer because you're a preservationist, clearly. And you know, you obviously came into this with goodwill. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot more to the there. You know, there's not a whole lot of there. So I understand the concern, and I know we have literature here on our area. But
Yeah,
everything I looked for, I just couldn't find anything. So,
Yeah, there's been, if I may, no building permits at all for the lot, nothing in the system at all for even the old house. And also, just for your information, if you want, I don't know if you saw this, but the tract was originally purchased by a man named Otis. He had planned those 138 houses and, you know, we may not want to hear this, but it was going to be artistic and charming and protected by sensible racial and racial restrictions and building restrictions. And that was what the plan was for the.
That was true of all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
So,
notorious. for
yes.
that, by the way.
Right.
That language, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very similar to how you do, you know, it's, you know, that would be nice to have more information, but the alternative seems kind of over the top, yeah, the other way in terms of delaying and and I think to your point, board member Hare, you know, just sort of trusting, you know, a bit of trust involved in all of this and you did say it was basically what you're saying, stone veneer.
Yes,
It's
yes,
not,
yeah. And,
except for parts of.
and there's no foundation. It's just, it's, I'm surprised it's still standing actually, but.
You're giving more evidence of why it should be looked into. No,
I'm personally leaning toward the staff recommendation of taking no action. I think we've had a good discussion, but I think I'm convincing myself.
Yeah, and I just want to make one comment before you, Peter, only because I've lived in Araby for 50 years.
Yeah.
I live in the track, the original track that the Otis company, I'll share that with you. And you know, we always felt that the Araby Cove was, you know, the Araby and the down below on the other side of the wash, you know, was you know, just you know, more vernacular architecture without architects. And, you know, it was just loaded with shacks at one time, you know, that blew to Indio. Or whatever's, but I observed, you know, that little house, the little troll house that our sons grew up around. And, I just don't think there's a lot more information I mean, yeah, and we love to preserve, the arch and the well and that sense of place that
Mhm.
is that old place. And, anyway, I just, I agree that we need to trust our residents and what they're doing somewhat.
And I'll send more information on my biography.
So now, these two guys both want to talk.
Well, I just
So-
wanted to ask staff a question.
Okay.
So just
Pete,
remind me again, at what point would this research be done? What would have to happen for it to move in that direction?
I guess the position staff was taking was to punt it to a point when that actual structure was being touched. And at that point, we could say, let's do some more research on this property as we look to alter that structure.
So if an application for a building permit was submitted, that is the trigger?
Yeah, well, it would be, another application before HSPB as a major alteration to a class 3 site. And so instead of taking it off the class 3 list, after this meeting, it would be retain it. And then when the applicant is ready to figure out what she's gonna do with that building, she would have to submit a major alteration to a class 3 site. And at that point, I think we would, take the position of we're altering the building, we need more information, we would recommend a state to do the research based on our current, ordinance language.
And it's the HPO that's responsible to determine whether it's a major or minor
Yes,
alteration.
yes, yes.
So they may believe it's minor, but then you would say, oh, it's actually major.
Right.
Yeah, you're responsible.
Correct, correct. And we have criteria, we have definitions in the code that help us to determine the major or minor, but in this instance, just given the state of the actual structure itself, a little bit more than a minor change would have to occur in order to bring it to even, current code
Okay,
standard.
yeah, I mean, I'm convinced too that the current process is onerous for the property owner at this stage anyway. So I support the staff recommendation.
Vice Chair Nelson.
Thank you. I have an idea about floating a possible solution to prevent a delay to the homeowner if feasible. I feel like in the history of the HSPB, in one of the meetings I attended when I wasn't on the board, that I heard about this type of thing being done that I'm about to propose. Both owners of each of these lots seem to clearly support the history of the neighborhood, and they bought there for that charm and that history. And they clearly like the arch, and they clearly like this little mysterious house. Would there be any possibility of asking them to prevent the 120-day delay or however long it could be? If each party would be interested in helping to support a report, a full historic report, whether they would be willing to in that contribute to the expense of the report. So that way you don't have to wait 120 days, and we have that on file as part of our records. So we get what we want about the history of the lot, the parcel, the neighborhood, if there turns out to be such history. But I really believe that it takes the group like Chattel or AIG to produce a truly comprehensive report when most people are coming to dead ends and you're not finding the information readily locally. So I wonder, staff, if this could be a proposal or compromise. I feel like it was done in the past on a property where we had a similar type of a situation. The owner supported, the preservation and the history, but there wasn't a there. So it didn't make sense for them to wait 120 days. So what do you think? Is that something that could be done?
I think this case is a little bit more complicated in that we, as a result of the lot split, parcel, the other parcel has no standing or no sort of protection where we can ask for that. That makes sense. We have reduced kind of our review to where, the house is. And so, I mean, I don't think we have a way of getting there with our code language today. I also, it seems like certain elements of that parcel are already, or have already been removed. And so we're not part of that review altogether. We would have to focus in on the actual home, and if that report were to be commissioned later on, there's still documentation that can incorporate the entire history of the lot itself. But I don't think we can obligate the new owners of the other lot to participate in that activity.
I can say for myself, you know, when it comes time to approach the old house, I would be willing to contribute to finding out. I'd love to find out and learn more. And I would contribute to that. You know, I wouldn't ask the front lot owners to, but I would willingly contribute to that in time. You know, decide what to do with it, you know.
Well, thank you for that. You know, it becomes a living document.
Yeah.
And it adds value to your property.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you ever decide to sell, you have that information
Mhm.
and you can give it back to a realtor or whatever. So it was just a suggestion.
Any other comments or questions or discussion? Any other? So because this is new business, we need a motion on what action we would like to take on this project. And Member Hanson?
I recommend that the HSPB take no action, allow the processing of the proposed major alteration and determine pursuant to SEQA that this action is not a project.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion by Member Hanson and a second by Member Rosenau. And is there any further discussion, Vice Chair Nelson?
I would like to propose an amendment if possible. To do the motion as stated, but to acknowledge that this particular homeowner has said she is willing to contribute to a historic resources report. And she's here and she said, yeah. So I think we should seize on that opportunity and make it part of the motion.
But no, because then we're requiring her to do it.
But we
Um,
trust that she will.
I think
consider.
it's in the minutes
Mhm.
and it's part of the meeting discussion, so I would not recommend to add that.
And I will send my biographical information.
So we
Okay.
trust that you.
You know who you're
Consider
trusting.
Sure. Okay, so any other discussion about the motion? Any other about that? Okay, so seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Congratulations. We look forward to watching your property
Yes.
develop and keeping the neighborhood so charming. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, okay. So that was a good, healthy, good discussion.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? That's good. So we're
I
gonna.
just want to say one thing.
yes.
real quick.
Sure.
I'm just
Uh-huh.
gratified that someone in the public took the time to write a very
Mhm.
in-depth argument.
Yes,
And it's, I think, very encouraging that people in the public are paying that much attention and would take the time to write that, so.
yeah, from Mark Llewellyn,
Yeah.
Llewellyn. So we appreciate that. Absolutely. Okay, so now let us proceed to discussions agenda item 5.
Oh, no, B.
What? 5, this is regarding the HSP work plan.
We actually do have one more item, under
B.
new business.
Or B.
Maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or B.
I'm sorry. I'm skipping right over, was so excited. I'm so excited. Okay. So, yes. So we have an application, by the city of Palm Springs for the possible historic designation of 1121 Linda Vista Road. So, you wanna,
And I can
Make
just
a report.
provide a very
Yeah.
brief, staff report on that, so, we had decided that any city initiated projects, once we have, the report, we would, staff would notify the board that the report is, coming or in hand, and would like the board to direct staff to set up the site visits if needed, and to, direct staff to get that, scheduled on the HSBD agenda. Two on the Denister Road was actually a project that came before the board, I believe in February. It was for a minor alteration to a class 3 site, and HSBD made the decision to put a stay on that project and pursue designation proceedings. And we did send out a request and a bid for that report to be commissioned. Chattel was selected for that report, and they are in kind of the finishing processes of that report. We're working on edits with them. And so we would like to ask HSBD to direct staff to get that put on the agenda for review. And again, that would be an application, city initiated application for historic designation.
so, okay, yes, Vice Chair Nelson?
Thank you. Just a quick question for staff on that. So the owner is aware that the city is proceeding forward, right?
Correct. And they were at the initial hearing back in February. And they are aware, they've been in communication with Channel. They had to give them access to the house to do the report. So they are aware, we will be, like I said, we're still working on edits, so I haven't passed on the actual report to them. But we will let them know, and of course, provide a copy of the report to the owners. And then if we are directed today, we'll go ahead and try to get that on the next June agenda.
Thank you.
So does the board have any other questions, Peter?
Yeah, I
or
just-
Lucy?
Why does it even have to come before us again, since we already initiated the process? I mean, wouldn't that the next step be to do exactly what this is saying without having to come before us again?
So it would have to come before the board in the full report with all of the criteria, and you would review it as a designation application.
But don't we do that automatically by saying that we want to put a stay on it, and isn't that the whole thing?
No, so when we put a state on it, we're requiring the report to be commissioned, and then when that report comes, it's possible that that report can say it doesn't have or significance. And so we would review that to see if all the criteria are met, if the integrity findings are met. And so you would review it as a full designation application and then provide recommendations to city council.
So that is that step here, you don't look at it first and then say it meets the criteria, or whatever, you just. Okay, I'm glad to vote on it, I just seem like it's an extra step we don't need to do, but okay,
Oh, you mean for the receipt portion, putting it on the.
yeah, just like.
Yeah, and we actually used to do that for all designation applications. We would have a receipt memo included as part of the agenda, but we had reduced it down to just city initiated projects. So it's to direct staff to get that queued up and also notify HSBD that that report is.
How about putting on the consent count? That way we don't have to discuss it at all.
Well, no, because we don't, they might recommend a class 2 or a class 1, or might say it's not eligible. No, I think
Part of the
that's part of the
discussion.
public
Today's
hearing.
item.
It's not a public
Are you
hearing.
talking about the days?
No, but it will be when it comes back.
Because we'll ask staff to schedule the visits and a public hearing.
Okay, well, I'm
So
voting
that's
yes
what
on
we're gonna
that.
do. We're gonna do
Why
that.
don't you do that
Okay.
recommendation?
So, we know what we're gonna do. So is there a motion that we do that?
I make that motion to do that.
Okay, and that's to direct staff to schedule a site visit.
Yes.
And a public hearing of the historic board to consider the
Exactly as
case.
you say,
And I'll second that motion.
right on.
Okay, so we have a motion by Maruzi and a motion, second by here we go. Okay. So I'll get excited again. So now let us proceed to the discussions agenda, item 5.
Move to vote.
No worry.
Oh, we have to, no, we don't, do we? Yeah, we, I'm getting tired. I need a break. Okay, all in favor of the motion
Oh, that motion. Aye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so the motion, it has been approved and motion passes 7-0. Perfect. We don't get breaks. Can we take a break? I'm really tired.
I need to like.
You know, I was wondering too, if anybody,
Continuous,
if people
yeah.
maybe wanna sit that way, so you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I guess you could do that
So we
too.
take a 5-minute break, is that okay? Then.
Flip more time.
Oh, okay, oh, I didn't have dinner, that's fine. So we will proceed to discussions. Agenda item 5 regarding the historic site preservation work plan. We established subcommittees consisting of board members to work on different aspects of the plan. And Sarah, you prepared a schedule and guidelines for our presentations over the next few months. So let's begin with the first presentation. And that, working with Sarah, Janet will take the lead in this subcommittee to help build a structure for us to learn and understand how we do our job as preservation board members. So, so Janet, who is an expert and has written the book, is going to lead us in a discussion. So why don't I just turn it all over to you, Janet, right now, and Sarah. Since.
So that official workshop series 2024. Yes, sorry, got my thing in front of me. Was this supposed to? Oh, there we go. So just to remind everybody, we were doing this in 3 parts, this month, next month, and then we get a break until October. So, we're gonna talk about part 1, historic resource surveys and historic context, and just give you a broad overview of, you know, what they are, their purpose and definitions. A little bit of reference to Palm Springs, but this is just gonna lay the foundation for part 2 and part 3 of this when we get specifically into the Palm Springs citywide historic context statement and the Palm Springs citywide survey, and using them to complete evaluations of significance so that when we get reports, we'll be understanding better what we're doing. So this is part 1, historic surveys and historic context. So as I mentioned, you know, these are the 2 main preservation tools that help us inform decisions. And it's certainly going to be important for us to understand these, but also, you know, as you go through the process of nominating a property, you have the nomination preparers who sometimes are professionals, and sometimes they're not. And the idea is that we potentially may actually have a set of guidelines or instructions, if you will, for anyone preparing nominations, whether they're professionals or not, so that they're using the context statement and the survey correctly. And so that by the time it gets to Sarah, it's pretty well put together, the preservation officer. And then by the time it gets to us, we have the information we need to make informed decisions. And the more informed we are, the better it's going to be as it goes through the city council process. So surveys and contexts are used together to identify historic resources, categorize them, make evaluations of significance, do nominations, actually designate, and then at the point of resources designated to manage, typically through, you know, if there's any changes to the property over time, or if there are any projects that may potentially impact a resource. So this is a quote at the top from the soon-to-be published Myers and Hansen book. To be effective in protecting and managing heritage, knowing what heritage you have is essential to safeguarding it. So without knowing what you have, you know, you're obviously not able to save it, and you're always being reactive. So the whole purpose of surveys is to understand upfront what it is you have that you're trying to protect. So a survey, briefly defined, is an activity over a specific time frame to systematically identify, record, and assess the significance of potential architectural, historic, and cultural resources within a defined area. And notice it's not just about architecture. So in our case, the defined area would be the whole city of Palm Springs. And surveys can be initiated by anybody. But in the case of what we do, those initiated by government, public agencies, local governments are going to be the most effective because we're using them in conjunction with enforcing city preservation laws and policies and designation criteria. And ideally, you want a survey to not be something that sits on a shelf somewhere, which that happened for many, many decades, but now that we're in more of a digital age, we really want them to feed into an inventory, which is accessible hopefully to the public. And this would, an inventory would be an ongoing record. It would contain anything in a survey as well as designations and surveys that happen or evaluations for other reasons. So contexts are another preservation tool, and they're critical to understand the character of the place. And unlike a survey, it's a written narrative technical document that identifies themes and trends and patterns significant to the history and development of an area. And then it's a logical process where you identify these trends and patterns, and then you identify historic resources types that relate to those themes. And then a context provides us consistent standards for evaluation of significance. And we're going to see how that works with the citywide context here. So these two concepts are not new. They've been around since the 1970s. And the whole concept of context, it's not actually worldwide, it's mostly in English speaking countries. But in the US, it was integral to federal standards and guidelines for preservation. The National Preservation Act was adopted in 1966, primarily to establish the National Register Program. And that's a whole nother reason why they did that, but we're not going to go into that tonight. But they did put forth some guidance for local governments, because as they developed a federal program, you had state and local governments that were interested also in developing preservation programs of their own. So in 1977, there was a bulletin, Guidelines for Local Surveys, Basis for Preservation Planning, that, believe it or not, dating back from that far, is still kind of a go-to resource. Certainly developed before the digital age. And there's been a lot of changes in the thinking of preservation since that point in time. It's still relevant, but not relevant for, digital surveys in 2024. And then also the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Preservation Planning, Identification, Evaluation, and Registration of Historic Resources that date from 1983. And that really, I think, is where the concept of context is more fully developed. So as, again, as I mentioned, we had federal programs, but states now were interested in developing their own programs and developing state standards and guidelines based on the national guidelines. And interestingly, the type of information that's collected during surveys is similar in almost every state. And it coincides a lot with the information that you would put on a national register form, even though you're not necessarily designating properties. So in California, they developed standardized survey and data collection forms. And that's the length instructions for recording historical resources. I have a couple copies of that. So the information that dates, I think, back to 82, those instructions, again, not in the digital age. And it's not so much about filling out the form. It used to be, fill out the form. And then all you had was a hard copy form and a notebook with that on a shelf somewhere. But now it's really about collecting the same information. So a lot of cities are doing digital data collection. And I believe Palm Springs did, obviously you had a digital data collection system when you were doing the citywide survey. So then we have in the 1970s, growing interest in municipal preservation programs, and the National Historic Preservation Act, amended in 1980, established the certified local government programs. And survey programs can be funded by certified local governments. I don't think that we've done that here in Palm Springs, but they also support other activities, preservation ordinances and plans. And the concept of surveys is typically addressed in ordinances as well. They were funding money back to the 1970s, even though the or the certified local government program wasn't adopted till later. Uh-oh, we're gonna take that out.
Oh, no, we got the wrong presentation.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay, I can just skip
that,
that,
yeah.
yeah. So surveys, uses for them, and we're gonna talk about the last bullet point, facilitating designations of properties to the local register, since that's why we're all here, but surveys are also used to inform planning decisions generally, to develop and implement land use policies. Importantly, to help with environmental review processes, the California Environmental Act, and then the federal Section 106 review. They're important for adaptive reuse programs and incentives, like we have the Mills Act here. And for other places, maybe not so much here, but disaster preparedness and response programs, and then generally enhancing public appreciation for the history of an area. So in this day and age, well, let me go back and just say surveys that were done in the 70s, 80s, when first surveys were first started to be done, there was very much a focus on monumental buildings, high-end architecture, architect design, and really resources associated with rich white men. And now one of the advantages of historic context statements is it gives you a better understanding of broader themes that are associated with the history and development of an area, and not just about architecture. So today we're covering all kinds of property types, not just buildings, things like cultural landscapes, and a much wider range of topics and themes, not just architecture, and being more inclusive of social, ethnic, and cultural histories. And then a lot of surveys were done again in the 70s and 80s, and believe it or not, a lot of cities have not done anything after that. So you have this whole post-war period that was never covered. Most surveys stopped at World War II. And so importantly here, of course, is, modernism and the post-war period. And then surveys are more done now by qualified trained professionals. They were always, but there was a real reliance on volunteers. And volunteers are still used in those broad-based programs for public participation, but it's not generally to do the surveys and the evaluations themselves. Those are done by qualified professionals for a better project. And then, as I mentioned before, this whole digital data collection and context being designed and formatted for use with digital surveys, and we're gonna see how that works, and making this information widely accessible to a range of users. So these are the components of a survey: field inspections, photography, research of all different types, the historic context, and a property evaluation, documenting the whole property and its significance, community outreach, and then final products, which are generally some type of report as well as the data itself. The intensive level surveys, this is the information that would be included in an intensive level. There are two different levels. There's a reconnaissance level, but those are typically done only if you want cursory information on a property. They don't include property evaluations. So they have a purpose, but sometimes they're a first step to getting a more intensive level survey done. And sometimes that has to do with money and phasing, because an intensive level survey is going to be a lot more money and time. So this is just the California forms. These are for building structures and objects. They have different forms for archaeology and linear resources, but these are the standard forms that every consultant in the state of California would use. And again, it's not so much about filling out the forms anymore. It's just collecting that information that's on the form. And then we're going to talk about context and the multiple property approach. And this is the approach that was used for Palm Springs historic context statement. So it's directly relevant. So just give you a background on how this works. And then in the next couple of weeks, we'll actually take a look at the context statement, and so you can understand how it works. But this was developed by the National Park Service to streamline the nomination of properties to the National Register related by theme. But it's really highly adaptable for surveys, and it hasn't been done before until recently to use them for surveys and to actually have eligibility standards. So in the past, the context statement was just a narrative history of a topic. But now they're developed specifically to use with surveys. And it's really also helpful because you can use this approach to evaluate properties under local criteria as well as state and national criteria. So surveys are useful for a lot of different purpose, even within one jurisdiction, you know, again, if we're getting back to the California Environmental Quality Act or Section 106 review, it's important to know that things are eligible for under state or national criteria. So the advantages of the approach, it ensures a wide range of themes are represented in a survey. And importantly, probably the most important thing, it's a consistent framework for resource identification and evaluation. And it also provides a framework for comparative analysis because it's a lot of preservation as compared to what. Everything associated with one thing is not necessarily significance. It ensures you're compliant with state and federal preservation standards and guidelines, which all cities should be. And then it can be expanded over time. So remember, I mentioned that, you know, surveys went up to the post-war period. So as we move forward in time, you can add new themes and new contexts as time marches on, but you can also add new themes and property types within an existing survey. So if you find something unusual that hadn't been identified by a previous survey, you have a place to categorize it. And then again, using it by diverse agencies. And people. So I have one slide about survey. I give a 5-hour presentation on that project. But the only reason I really have this slide in here is because Survey LA was the survey that developed this format for using historic context in a survey and doing it with an electronic survey where you're actually evaluating and selecting things in the field. And so it became a replicable model for doing context-based surveys. So that's why I have the one slide here, just to give the kudos to Survey LA. So this is the content and structure of the report. And again, Palm Springs Historic Context Statement is developed just like this. The consultant that did the citywide survey and context statement was one of the major consultants that worked on Survey LA. So again, this approach has been used by those consultants moving forward with other cities that they've surveyed because it worked and is so effective. So you have this an historic context, and then you have a theme, and in many cases sub-themes, and then the report today on the Ocotillo Lodge, they actually extracted out of it the context themes and sub-themes from the context statement, and then they wrote the narrative around that. So that's what they're doing. They took this context, extracted it out. So then they had their narrative context that they wrote, identified the property types. In that case, of course, it was only one residential district. And then importantly, the context statement has eligibility standards that everyone uses consistently to evaluate whether or not a property is significant against. So, and I don't think that's been done consistently with other consultants. And the eligibility standards are associative qualities, character defining or physical, and then the integrity aspects that we talk a lot about in our meeting. Associative qualities may be, you know, it's associated with a person. It's not about architecture at all. You know, these are relative to what the property is. And then your evaluation criteria, which, as I mentioned, National Register, local, regional, and then, I'm sorry, regional or local. Regional could be state. And then your evaluation. So this is a real good framework for understanding, first of all, writing the context statement using that format, but also using this when we're going to be looking at some specific examples. And then Sarah's going to give you a quick overview of Palm Springs surveys and context. And I think the idea here is that, you know, maybe before the next workshop, like take a look at it online and see how it's organized, just familiarize yourself with the format. And then we're going to talk in a little more detail. And then I think with the third presentation, we're going to do some actual examples of taking the survey and the context statement to do an evaluation. Some evaluations using specific Palm Springs examples.
So these are just, did you have a question? Or do you want to wait till?
Yeah, it's only 2 more
Yeah,
slides.
2 more slides, we're almost done. In regards to Palm Springs, you know, the city of Palm Springs commissioned the citywide contact statement in 2014, but we do have a history of doing a comprehensive survey that dates back to the 1976. And then subsequently, we've taken efforts to conduct a survey. And so I think in that regard, we have a strong history and background in doing surveys of our existing resources. And the survey was subsequently updated back in 2001 and then 2004. And again, Palm Springs became a certified local government in 2014, which requires that survey to be updated. And then in 2014 through 2016, the citywide survey included a more comprehensive study and the context statements and the survey updates that you see on our website. In 2017, we did a chapter in our context statement related to ethnic minorities. And I think if we're able to use this link real quick. And I know we all know where that information is located, but we can't stress enough how much effort and information is embedded in this particular page of our website, where it lists our citywide contact statements by periods of significance. Just looking at the table of contents, you can see that broken down. I do want to take a quick second to click on this link where it gives us a pretty good breakdown that you can see in one shot, and how much work has actually gone into this. And so you can see the context divided by period, and then you see the themes that have been, themes and sub-themes that have been extracted from that study. And so going back to the diagram that Janet shared earlier, being able to drill down and really understand the important historical significance, not just based on architecture, but also based on specific events that tie into national history as well as local history. And so I think having a little bit more in-depth knowledge of just how these contact statements are written, and then also equipping our consultants with this information and how those reports come in, allow us to do our review rather quickly also, but in a more comprehensive manner. And so again, all of these resources are available for everyone to download and take a look at it. Not only is it very interesting research, it's organized in a way that helps us to evaluate our historic resources report as they come in.
And then also, you know, within the Palm Springs survey, we'll talk about this again, you know, coming weeks, but when they did the survey, where you have a list of eligible resources, they're placed within a context and a theme and a property type. So they're already categorized in a way that makes sense, rather than just saying, here's a bunch of, you know, mid-century modern houses.
And another thing is, most projects fall back on more than just one theme or sub-theme. And so
Yeah.
it adds the layers to its significance. You know, sometimes we really get hung up on the architecture piece of it or the association piece of it, but then there are layers of other sub-themes that really enhance that resource and its importance to our inventory. So again, it's kind of building that up and really understanding it on a higher level. But I think we wanted to conclude it there and then take in any questions. And of course, the next series gets a little bit more in depth to our context specifically in Palm Springs.
So how fortunate we are to have Sarah and Janet, who's the expertise, and with Janet and not sure everybody, but your presentation and your book that you're an author of. What's the title again, and when is that coming out?
Inventories and Surveys for Heritage Management, lessons for the digital age. And it's officially available July 30th.
Who's
Getty Publication.
Getty? Yeah. So great. So wonderful to have that resource textbook, really.
Yeah, and a lot of this material is,
Mhm.
you know, in a different way.
Yeah.
It's written down on pages.
Well, you
but-
did that.
Well, Jake has a question.
I know, you did that. I know you're not there. You did that in 20 minutes.
That's
so
what we
very-
said.
That was very good. That was very good. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. Vice Chair Nelson?
Good question for Janet. Couldn't help but notice the last federal guideline standards were in 1985, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you know if they are currently working on or planning another updated guideline and standards?
Yeah, you know, I don't know, it's just, they're not as on it as you think the federal government, would be, or maybe you wouldn't think the federal government would be on it. But, yeah, it's one of the ways we sold this book, actually, was that, you know, these are still useful and the basic principles in those documents still hold true. But, you know, it's just the information is just outdated for a lot of different reasons. But, no. Although I think the Association of Preservation Technology, I think, has gotten a grant to work with, I think it actually was a federal government grant to work with some other agencies and individuals in doing some updates. I don't know if that, you know, includes, there's a lot of different documentation standards that are federal. I don't know if it includes surveys. I think it should. But I don't know if it does or not, but that effort is just getting started.
Thank you.
Lucy?
I'm confused about the 1969 versus 1978 dates as relates to class 3. Oh, shoot. I'm confused by the 1969 versus 1978 dates as relates to class 3. That it was implying that surveys hadn't evaluated properties after 69.
I don't know the full history.
You have the answer to that?
I know the
I
answer.
know that the 78 date came with the updates and
Right.
related to asbestos and creating a baseline for appeasing the community, as a community request saying we wanted a date that everyone can remember, and asbestos, I think, was that date, where that's where 1978 comes from.
So prior to the ordinance revision, then they cut off in 1969. And when Dick Patek was the chair, there was a group of us in the community saying there's all this stuff after 69, you know, from the early 70s that's being threatened. So that was why a group of us proposed ordinance revisions and Dick pushed it through and insisted on that 1978 to help protect all of the capture and all of the other stuff that was built in the 70s that's so significant and now coming to the field of age. So something to know.
But my question still is, if the surveys end in 69, how can you have, there are properties on the class 3 list that are between 69 and 78, correct?
I believe so, for the class 3 list?
Yeah.
Yes.
But they weren't evaluated in the survey? I mean, that's what I'm confused.
Time for a new survey.
Yeah.
So somehow, how did those properties between 69 and 78 get on the class 3 list if there was no criteria or anything to do that for?
Well, the class 3 are not fully evaluated, so
But somebody had to.
it might, I don't know, like I said, but then we should all read the survey. Maybe they give you the justification for that in the recent survey, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and you're referring to the recent.
Maybe we can look at that, and maybe give you a better answer next time.
Okay,
But you know, one way around all that is don't have a date. You know, a
I
lot of
agree.
ordinances now don't have any dates. You know, it is, people took the National Register's 50 years, but there are exceptional circumstances. But, so cities were using the 50-year rule, even though sometimes they did surveys that were 40 or 45, because it takes years to do a survey, so they didn't want it to be outdated immediately. But the best thing to do with an ordinance is to just not have a date.
but it was controversial because a lot of property owners said, well, wait a minute, how can anything in the 80s be significant?
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
want you to
well,
break, you
that
know,
happens
so
every decade, you know.
the council had to make a decision and compromise, and that's why we came up with 78. I mean, the
That's why-
asbestos thing is.
But that's why you have historic context.
Right.
So that somebody can write about the 80s or, you know, Survey LA actually went all the way up to 1980. And it started, you know, 2005. And so the stuff, when it was 25 years old, was, you know, And it was arbitrary, but it was like, this sounds good. You know?
Hmm.
And because you have to have enough time pass to have a perspective on whether or not something is significant. Unless it really is of exceptional importance, you know, a certain person or an architect or, yeah, something that is just, you know. You don't really, yeah, but some of these more subtle contexts need time for people to understand it, but yeah, that happened in, everybody thought that with the fifties, you know, and then the sixties, seventies.
Yeah,
So
if I-
90s.
if I might add, if I recall correctly, I think there was the question of whether the city wanted to adopt a rolling date of 40 years. Or if there was a year that would be more appropriate, and I think based on community feedback, as HPO said, the date was 78, because when you disclose as a realtor, that was the time frame that not only are you disclosing asbestos for a structure built prior to that year, but also you might have a potentially eligible site because you're of the age of your structure. That's for.
Just real quickly, so if you go back to the HSPB minute of 2019, when they were talking about this very thing. And they were getting ready to propose the ordinance revision, they did exactly, but Debbie said, they said that getting that benchmark of 50 years, not working anymore because it's not protecting any of these properties from the early 70s. So that was why they decided to get rid of that and then put in the actual date. So I wouldn't be in favor of going back to saying 40 years, 45 years, 50 years. I think it's important to have a date until the new survey is done. So that you can so the HSBB can have a view over all of that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
problem is, in the real world, you know, surveys aren't updated that quickly, you know, they're expensive.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of time to manage, and, you know, that's one of the big questions people are asking us in LA, which plan to update this? I was like, are you kidding? Took 15 years to do this, you think we're gonna get anybody to support another one now before we're done?
Mhm.
You know, I didn't even go there with it, because, yeah, it was not gonna happen. But it's difficult, it's, you know, they cost a lot of money and they take a lot of time.
Okay, any other questions before we go on to the next presentation? So continuing with the work plan presentation, so we have Eric and Jade and Kurt who worked on inventory. Jeffrey, who did I say? Jay, Jeff, all the J's, sorry, Jeffrey, yeah, and this is inventory analysis, so a good segue, huh? Okay, who's gonna?
Can I start?
Sure.
Take it away.
So we were sort of tasked with giving an analysis of what is out there that we can look at in the future. Our current work plan has 7 or 8 properties that, you know, we wanted to look at. A few of them have already been passed through, nominated the Takowitz Golf Course Clubhouse. We're looking at the the gas building kind of. So what else is out there that we should be, you know, it's not like we should be formulating a new list each year as a part of our work plan, but like tackling what's out there. And we sort of took the entire, in a prior life, I was a data that where you could put everything into a spreadsheet, pivot table it out, and it gives you 5 answers in 3 minutes. So I took the whole list of potential eligible off the website, dumped it into a spreadsheet. And it didn't show us anything, unfortunately. It was, you know, it goes, it's a lot, it's thousands of line items, address. There was little status codes, which ended up being very scholarly and academic, but it, you know, potentially eligible due to this or that. But we wanted to sort of break things down by like category, and your presentation was perfect for us leading into ours. You know, what are we looking at? What are we lacking on the class 1 list? And you can go to the class 1 list here in a second when because you did some analysis on that, but you know, we have a lot of residential already on there. What is, you know, what is out there that we're not grasping at, you know? Commercial, residential, educational, religious. And then we got then we started into more cultural references based on tribal or prehistory or pioneer era or segments of history that are more current, like the gay movement or fifties golf course lifestyle, people moving here for that and clubhouses, that sort of stuff. So we were trying to like create different categories that hopefully that list could have shown us. It didn't quite, and so, you know, and we'll get to community outreach down the road in one of our next meetings, but we were sort of wanting to highlight stuff that we as a group think that is being under designated. And why don't you go into the existing and what you kind of.
Sure, I just did a quick, the existing class 1 and class 2, just a
Do you
little,
want to turn on
oh, sorry,
for
I'm usually loud enough.
recording? For recording.
Sure, I went through the existing class 1, class 2 sites and just did a quick casuals, just review of the numbers. And as it stands right now, about 60 to 65% of them are residential. And that's to be expected. They sort of are self-feeding. People buy a house, we pay attention, and it becomes a landmark or it doesn't. The other things, hospitals, municipal, entertainment, education, religion, those are a little tricky, but one thing I noticed in that 60 to 65 was over time, the proportion has consistently gone up in the residential. In the early days in the 80s, it was only 30. It was only 25%, and then it went to 40 and 60 and 74 and then 80%. So the residential is self-feeding, and so our thinking was we need to counter that possibly. Pay attention to other things, like Eric said, expand our view beyond architects and architecture and the modern period into other bigger, expansive views of what a historical site might be. We even talked about the potential of looping tribal sites. And I even posed the question, we started to discuss the waterfall in Tackwitz Canyon. How do we, you know, that's their jurisdiction, but can we create some sort of parallel overlap? They maintain control, but we acknowledge that that's a significant piece of the cultural history of the valley. And so that's, we've been really trying to figure out, like Eric said, you know, even events or spaces, the Hollywood movie, we started talking about the Purple Room or different Rat Pack Hollywood 60s events. Places, the Purple Room is remodeled beyond recognition, but historically as a place, it's a significant piece of how people look at Palm Springs and what happened here. So we've been really trying to figure out how to expand that, slice things a little more concisely from prehistory, pioneer, health, when it was more of a sanitarium, and then the evolution into resort living and the Hollywood, and then the post-war and all gay movement, and all the way sort of setting it up for whatever the future might be, the next period, the next evolution. Big ideas, but how do we, if we're gonna go there, how are we gonna do it? And what are those categories and what are the ways to get there? So that's what we're.
And then I think that the next step was, you know, which we're down the road is community outreach, because 7 of us can't really decide on all of this. There's so many stakeholders here in town, whether it be the tribe, for example, the different neighborhoods, or which the neighborhood organizations are all there, or voting districts, you know, should this council members be reaching out to their districts and gathering thoughts? Should we be talking to the school district, for example, because they have a lot of unprotected buildings that we've seen in the past, some of them go down, so bringing all these stakeholders to the table in a variety of manners that, you know, the city can sponsor, you know, town hall meetings, the tribe can sponsor, we can work, you know, in connection with them. But it ended up being more complicated, I think, than what we.
Much more
Yes. Complicated than what we thought we were gonna
Yeah.
be, but then looking at your presentation before ours really kind of solidified what we were aiming for.
Yeah.
And the challenges that we're looking at, so.
I think it sounds to me like a really good start. For some solid thinking. And, but maybe, like you said, thinking about. There's sort of these layers of the context and the themes and the property types. And then looking at what's underrepresented in the city's inventory. And in the list of designated resources, so all those forces kind of coming together. But yeah, I think it's gonna take a lot of thinking. Sometimes thinking is like, takes a lot of time.
A lot of exercise.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to have a consultant assist us in this, and we don't have to do it all ourselves, or they don't have to do it, staff doesn't have to do it themselves? Just because, I mean, they, a good consultant can help us organize our thoughts and do some research out there, and I don't know. I'm just-
Consultants cost money, though. That's, what is the budget? And we talked
Sure
about
enough, they cost money.
initially,
They cost money.
how many could we designate? How many city designated properties? 5 a year, 6 a year? If we sort of created this pipeline, and created a process, how many can we do? Is a good question, and that's still open-ended. So a consultant is a great idea. Would they give us the cash?
It's just the outreach alone. Boy, can be massive.
Yeah,
massive
yeah.
outreach. And it's kind of an expertise too, to do that kind of outreach depending on who you're outreaching to.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
getting
do
the
think,
message across correctly.
I mean, I think when you get to outreach, you have to have a consultant, or somebody who at least has some area, level of expertise and independence.
The independence, I think, is key, because we can't do it. We're judging on the other side, right? So we have to remain neutral and let them go do their thing. So that's
So that brings up
Another
the question
curveball.
of money, though. So would we have to reevaluate our budget and see how we could fund some of these things, or how does all that work?
I'm wondering if we can pose the question a little bit differently for the group then, and taking into account Janet's presentation of context and themes that have already been created. I think you guys already, without this, have kind of landed on those sub themes. And since we have a context statement that already lays some of that out, maybe taking, just the index that was created and seeing how that applies to what we have, and seeing if we can categorize what we have according to that, and seeing what kind of data falls out of that might be a good start. I think the objective for that particular subcommittee was really just to create some objectives. And just reading what we wrote here is to develop criteria for a clear process for HPD members to nominate eligible projects. And so we wanted to continue the process of city initiated projects from the HSBD. We wanted to develop some criteria on how we nominated those. And so again, I think we drill down to the context and the sub themes. I think we could get there and develop almost a checklist even of criteria
And property types.
and property types.
But I don't know, I think, I think your approach was really, as a first step, was really spot on, but you know what we could do? If and we have time to do it, but if there was some more thinking in that regard and maybe some more playing with the data and, we could get a certified local government grant to hire a consultant to do it. And that's $30,000. That's not bad.
That's a start.
You need to apply, but I've volunteered before to write grants. I've been writing them for 18, 20 years, and I have 100% success rate. Yeah. With all my grants, 100%, not just the certified, but the certified local government grants, what would be so interesting about it is because it's really an innovative concept. We're trying to diversify our inventory and our list of designated resources, but this is the thinking that's happened behind it, but we need some help. Unfortunately, the cycle to apply, it's April or May, right? Just passed. So but in the meantime,
We could do some legwork.
we could do some, legwork to think through it and then maybe, cause I think, I don't know, I think you could do a lot with $30,000. And I think you might have some people interested in doing it just because it's, we could, it's different. Most people are, we want to do a survey of this or that, or we're gonna do, most people don't do anything innovative, especially if we brought in the outreach. We want to reach out to the community and ask them what's important to them to better represent the city's history. Just a thought.
Excellent.
I can't think of any other like grant money you could get, but, I mean, yeah. I don't know if it's difficult some cities make it easier than others to get grants. So I don't know if you have to go to city council and do all that stuff. Or if it has to be over a certain amount. I mean, maybe you could let us know. At a
Yeah.
certain point in time, how many hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah, I think the grants that I've worked on directly for the city, most of them have required a council resolution.
So if they do, then we'd have to prepare it actually a lot sooner because it'd have to get agendized. So even though the date for the state may be April, we'd have to get it done months ahead. So then it's not that much time, if you think about it that way.
A quick question. So it seems to me like there's already quite a bit of analysis in the current survey. You just have to look for it. If you look at the contact statement and there's some themes that are already there, and you look at all the resource data codes, and then you go by the list of data codes, you can do a lot of that legwork yourself. And I feel like we have the experience and know-how, especially with Janet here, and with Peter's experience in multiple property nominations, and with staff, very extensive experience. So, maybe that's a good goal, like a 2-3 year goal, but I wouldn't be in favor of spending $30,000 anytime soon when I think it's up to us to more thoroughly analyze what's already there in front of us in our survey.
Well, this wouldn't be for over a year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while to get the grant and it wouldn't start until a year. If you apply for the grant, they review them all. And you have time to hire a consultant. They wouldn't start till October of 2026. So you have this year and all the rest of next year.
So, Janet, what's the meaty, long-term benefit of hiring a consultant to flush out better inventory analysis? Forgive me, because I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't think we know really what that is. I mean, the advantages of it, obviously, but I mean, they still need to do some more thinking, some more work on this, but I mean, you may find that you have everything you need. It was just a thought of a way if we did want to do something like that, that where we get some money, that's all.
Well, I thought part of what you were using that grant money for was to actually facilitate the outreach.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that
That in of
just
itself.
needs that
Yeah.
kind of.
And that's a specific kind of person and it's like I said, I always recommend using outside people to do the outreach for you.
Well, then you don't have that conflict of interest that
Yeah.
you spoke about, it's the outside expert. To equalize it.
Bridge that.
So, yeah, so do we have any other questions? So that was great, you did that in 20 minutes. Super. Keep it.
Thank you.
So that was super. So thank you very much for those presentations and look forward to June as well. So, okay, so now let us proceed next to board member comments. And I just want to send a friendly reminder that during this time, board comments is that we need to stay within the realm of comments and not try to invite a discussion or decision about, something else at this time. Just comments, because it is 8:20. So comments from the board. Over here. Do you have any, Jay? What, no comments? Do you have any comments? You always do. But you don't have to,
okay.
but you don't have to, other than
Yeah,
a
you don't
simple thank you. to do.
Well, because board member comments is meant to be very general and
Yeah.
outside the scope of the agenda.
Yes.
Something that came up recently in the public sphere. Involving the mayor and some other things that are going on with the library. It's been an issue for, I don't know, 15+ years now, maybe longer than that. The library is on the class 3 eligible list. It is a city-owned property, yet it never comes before the HFPB ever. And, you know, it's really upsetting and frustrating to me and a lot of people in the community why a city-owned public building, if you look at other city-owned public buildings in LA, for example, train stations, libraries, whatever. The commission, the store commission in those cities has purview typically over the whole building inside and out. Not in every case, but in many cases. So why, time and time again, going back 15 years, well, the HSBB told you can't talk about the library, you can't put it on your work plan, you can't redesignate it. I mean, this is the fact of the matter, so I don't know if staff has a good answer now, but if you could maybe provide an answer at our next meeting with maybe a background summary. Because it's really frustrating, there are subcommittees now and task force that are going on that have been appointed by the mayor, I've been invited to one of them. And they're just real disconnect of why the HSBB is not hearing about a city-owned class 3 building. So I would love some report on that.
Just to respond really quickly about that, if there is, a finalized project that triggers major review for HSBB. I have been in a few meetings related to the library more recently, and I've made that really clear. I told them that, once we have a final project that impacts the exterior, it will trigger class 3 review at a major, that would, you know, potentially be a review at the HSBB level. And so once they have that scope, developed, and I'm able to take a look at it, we'll make that determination, so.
They moved fairly far along. The newspaper had a whole, you know, story about it, and they had renderings, and they've come a long way. At what point is it time for us to get involved?
When an application, so I think right now there's a lot of conversation, based on, programming and what the library needs and things like that, but when it starts, right. And again, I think we're pretty close to that point, and we'll have to.
I think so, yeah.
Them,
You went to
letting
council.
them know, so they are aware that there's a potential review at HSBB based on exterior changes. I know that the scope has been shifting pretty dramatically. I think at one point there was, you know, additions discussed and all that stuff, and I think a lot of that has been pared down, based on the needs and consuming cost. But more to come, and I will update you all on what I know.
But Jade was saying interiors as well. Don't we also have purview over interiors since it's city-owned property?
It's not based on city-owned properties, although in this case, I think there are certain public accessible spaces. that would have, been triggered, but again, it's not a designated site. So if you're a class 1 site and you have that designation and you have the public aspect, publicly accessed space, then there's that potential for HSBB review. It's technically considered an eligible site. So we would be looking at the exterior changes on the trigger major.
That's a
Okay, sure.
I sent everyone
Mhm.
an email, urgent towns, country center issues. So, not to go into the details, I have a copy of the report that the HSPB reviewed and approved back in 2020, and it's very detailed. And so what I'm asking for is essentially a subcommittee, because I guess Julie Brown, I feel we could have 3 people from the HSPB, because it's under our purview, it's class 1 historic site, it's also the National Register. To with city staff, go to the property and just evaluate it. What is the current status? Because the architects that were approved and provided all this information have not been involved at all since this came before us. And I think that's a little odd, especially since a lot of work has already been completed, and yet none of it was done by the people who presented the report that was approved by the HSPB. So anyway, I think that if we could get a subcommittee going and set up a time, we can go there and we can walk the property and we can look at this report and come up with some thoughts. That's what I'm proposing.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent comment.
The work that's being done now, is it being performed under a permit, a city issued permit? Or is it just haphazardly being randomly done?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry I wasn't able to respond to your initial email, but this way I can, address it with everyone. So initially there was I think there may have been a single tenant who was going into a majority of that space, and that project came before HSBB received, entitlements and approvals. Since then, there have been 2 staff level reviews related to the changes that have happened at Town and Country. Their scope has been significantly reduced as it came before staff. And I believe the initial tenant was no longer the tenant, so they had a change in the commercial configuration of the spaces. So in relation to the Town and Country Center and the work that's been completed, there were 2 certificate of appropriatenesses that were addressed at the staff level, where it made minor changes to the initial scope that was a certificate of appropriateness on a minor scale. So we had one that dealt with the space where Crazy Mel's used to be, and it was reduced down to fenestration changes and cleaning of that facade. And then there was another one that was issued towards the beginning of last year, related to the old Bank of America site where they had a storefront change. And so those, while there was an entitlement before, they did not act on that one, and you so significantly reduced to just storefront changes. And so those were approved as staff level.
I still think we should, at least as an HSPB, have the opportunity to evaluate it, because there's a lot more to this report that was approved than just those small changes.
We could take a look at that report, and then, so Peter, are you suggesting just getting a review of the initial approval that was done?
I just think that 3 of us should be, and a staff person, able to go over there, evaluate what we see, because I took some photographs today of the restaurant portion that were frightening. You look up and you can see the ceiling is collapsed. I mean, I don't know if that's part of our purview, but it's a historic resource, I mean, all these things I think need to be discussed.
Right.
So maybe we can put together a report based on what we see and also compare it to what we approved.
So why don't we give you some time to think about the best way to move forward?
Sure.
But not putting you on the spot right now to make a decision, but this is a very,
Yeah, and I-
important comment that needs attention, and we appreciate the consideration that you
Yeah.
think we should.
I know that there's more background related to the restaurant building behind there, the upkeep and maintenance that's been happening. I know that city council approved a specific type of security fencing related to that area, so we can look back at what that information was, and
Including interior aspects.
let me take a look at these
Okay.
individual reports and see where we are on that.
Good.
You know, that people, my understanding that the preservation architects that were retained by the property owner are no longer involved. And I think the condition of the 2020 hearing or, final decision was that those preservation architects would be involved consistently going forward. And I can't remember a case in recent memory where a class 1 building structure this so important was where it didn't come before HSPB. So it's somewhat concerning. So I agree with Peter that it's important for some community to go to site, and that outreach should be done to the property owner to say, why aren't you still retaining the property owners as the HSPB directed and agreed on 4 years ago.
Yeah, let's look at the research behind it, because I was not here with those approvals, so let me dig into that a little bit further, and then we can look at current conditions and current approvals.
Yeah, I'm just sorting out, like what Peter's saying, but the question of, demolition by neglect versus changes to the restoration, proposal, yeah. Two different things, two different jurisdictions, but both important.
Yeah.
But I think the jurisdictions both are HSBB though, demolition by neglect. Cause there's a whole section in here on condition, I mean, you know, property maintenance of historic resources, there's a whole section here.
Who can condemn the building?
Well,
I mean, that's the ultimate.
yeah, I mean, building
distinction,
safety, I
right?
assume.
Yeah, it's falling apart. so.
Yeah, building safety, but there are things that we do have jurisdiction over as it relates to condition.
Okay.
So it's not just whether or not they're following the rules that we approved. Right, because I mean, I looked at the ordinance and there's a whole section here on maintenance
Yeah.
of class 1 historic, and class 2 historic sites.
Yeah, no, that's correct, and I think, when we get to the actual enacting of those things, it, you know, gets other departments involved.
Yeah, that's fine.
But let me take a look at the original, kind of documentation and approvals, and then where we stand in terms of that portion of the property, because I know the front portion of the property has.
Palm Canyon.
Correct, Palm Canyon. Palm Canyon, the Palm Canyon side has gone through different, staff level approvals to allow those tenants to move in. The side on Indian Canyon is a different story.
It's a big property, very big with a lot of buildings, so, and
Absolutely.
landscaping.
Did you want me to pass
Sure.
this? This was actually related to the code status that we were talking about. Peter wanted to share this with everyone. I think your group actually thought this as part of.
Thank you.
Why
were we?
Just because when I looked at the class 3 list of eligible resources, they all have status codes. And I didn't think that everyone on the board necessarily had at their fingertips what those status codes mean. Like there was a 7R and somebody like, oh, okay, it's 7R. Oh, here it is.
No, and they referred to the status codes earlier, because when consultants in California do a survey, they assign these status codes are developed by the State Office of Historic Preservation.
And they're on the list, the class 3 list.
Yes.
Wow. No homework.
Oh, yeah, gee.
Pages and pages.
It's
Yeah,
just a redness. Just
Well, but we could maybe just talk a little bit about those in June, because you had mentioned that they were in the tables that you were using.
Yeah. Bit of a scramble for us to understand
Yeah.
and interpret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other board member comments? Okay, staff comments. Good staff.
Then it's really invigorating conversations on all levels, I think. Which is great, but it is late. I just had one comment. I just wanted the board to know that some of our nomination applications are going before city council as our two-step process. They go with our recommendation. And the more want that to report back is at Tikian, which was supported by HSBB as a class 2 site, did go before city council and it did get tabled. And it's tabled for May 23rd. And they wanted to hear from the applicants in regards to the project, if they have any plans for restoration, different follow-up questions that they had related to that. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that that was happening, and we have a couple other nomination applications on it for city council, so. Yeah, these things. Oh, yes, I Country Club Estates was accepted and nominated as a historic district.
When the city council has questions about our report or our recommendation, do any of us ever speak on that, or even staff, would you say, well, you know, after the applicant says, oh, you know, I don't agree that it should be class 2, blah, blah, blah. Is there ever any response from you? Saying that, well, again, this is what HSPB felt.
Yes, and usually I would summarize saying this is the HSBB decision and their resolution that's presented before you. In this particular instance, they had questions about why staff recommended what we did in terms of no designation at that point in time. So they took those recommendations and then had follow-up questions for the applicant, and so that's why it got taken.
So they weren't questioning what our decision was?
They were questioning, so they, I think they were kind of split, they understood where it was on the, why it should be decided on class two, but they also felt like there was, a lack of integrity there too, and so they had a lot of questions related to the project. And some said that they agreed with staff analysis of the lack of integrity at that time, or at this time, and I think they wanted some reassurances from the applicant to know exactly what their plan.
Gotcha, okay, that's very interesting, thank you.
Can I ask you just a quick question on that? So we recommended class two, but when it went to council, you recommended.
The same recommendations went up, yeah, so, it was, this was the staff's recommendation, this was the HSCD's recommendation, they were not in sync. And so that came to them exactly the way it was.
And by the way, I'd asked that a while ago on another case. I don't think you were here yet, but I was told, because I said, can go to a meeting and they said, the city attorney, I think, said, no, that we've already weighed in at our own meeting, the resolution
As a
represents our
board,
opinion.
not as
Yeah.
an individual.
All I know is when I was on the planning commission. Certain members of the planning commission would speak publicly at city council, so
Yeah.
there's not consistency in this. Interpretation by the attorney.
That's what I was told.
That was the only thing that I wanted, you all to be aware of, and then that kind of constitutes it, and that's the game that I started.
I mean, speaking individually and then speaking on behalf of the board, I don't know if the planning commissioners, how they were.
I think it was pretty much speaking of the planning.
Yeah. So, okay, so, any other comments from staff? Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, so seeing no further discussion, this meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board is adjourned at 8:35 PM to our next meeting of Tuesday, June 4th, 2024 at 5:30. So thank you all for all your participation, hard work and thinking and discussion. Wow. It was great. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Longer meetings. huh?